CNBC बाजार प्रस्तुत करता है क्रिप्टो कॉर्नर पावर्ड बाय बाइनेंस।
नमस्कार, स्वागत है आपका CNBC आवाज प्रेजेंट्स क्रिप्टो कॉर्नर पावर्ड बाय बाइनेंस। हमारे साथ जुड़ रहे हैं एसबी शेखर जो कि हेड ऑफ एपैक हैं बाइनेंस के लिए। मिस्टर शेखर, हाय, थैंक यू सो मच हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए। सबसे पहले, जहां पर आज क्रिप्टो इंडस्ट्री स्टैंड करती है ग्लोबल मार्केट्स में, क्या नैरेटिव हमने शिफ्ट होता हुआ देखा है स्पेकुलेशन से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर और फाइनेंशियल रेल्स की तरफ?
To answer your question, it's very well underway and it's structural, it's not cyclical in our view. Digital assets are no longer a fringe of financial services sitting on the outside. They're actually being woven in as part of it. So I'll give you some statistics to back that up quickly. In 2025, total crypto market capitalization surpassed 4 trillion. And this was for the first time. So this is an all-time high. US spot Bitcoin ETFs attracted over 21 billion in net inflows during that same period. And about just over 1 million BTC now sits on corporate balance sheets. Stablecoins in particular have been a bellwether or like a main leading indicator for this trend. And they've crossed 300 billion in supply and are processing transaction volumes that rival Visa, MasterCard at the moment. These are not speculative or temporary metrics. They are, at this point, infrastructure metrics.
एशिया की अगर बात की जाए मिस्टर शेखर, तो ये बहुत जल्द यहाँ पर सेंटर ऑफ ग्रेविटी बनता हुआ नजर आया है क्रिप्टो इनोवेशन के लिहाज से। आप क्या कहेंगे, ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है? और अगर रेगुलेटरी जुरिस्डिक्शन की बात की जाए एपैक इंडस्ट्री में या एपैक कंट्रीज में, उसे आप कैसे देखते हैं?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's actually coming together of a number of things, right, that need to make this actual formula for success. The first is, as you mentioned, is regulatory clarity. So a whole number of large APAC markets have moved very decisively into formal and full-on licensing frameworks. So away from the spectrum of AML-only registrations or very minimal registration requirements to a full licensing framework. So Hong Kong Stablecoin Ordinance, which came into effect last year, established a mandatory licensing regime for fiat reference stablecoin issuers. And if you recall, this is on the back of the historical VATP guidelines that existed for exchanges, which is also maturing into the broker-dealer model at the moment. So it's taking steps towards a full-fledged framework. Singapore has always had the Payment Services Act, but they've also now enforced the Financial Services Markets Act, Part 9 licensing framework for digital token service providers. And they've set a deliberately high compliance bar. So now they are moving into the phase of prioritizing quality over quantity, right? South Korea has taken big steps in terms of legalizing spot crypto ETFs in 2026. So they moved away from the long-standing retail-only model to a institutional and global adoption model. And this comes on the back of other changes like opening up exchanges to institutional clients for the first time, actually probably mandatorily requiring corporates to have as a part of their balance sheet crypto holdings, and also looking into the one exchange, one bank account model, right? Japan, for example, has a similar trend where they're moving away from a tax structure that was penalizing crypto almost relative to other traditional financial instrument markets, and bringing that down to a flat 20% tax consistent with securities, and taking actions again to open up to institutional adoption as well. So, India, which leads APAC consistently over the last couple of years in terms of digital asset adoption, and which has a relatively uniform adoption countrywide and has a very strong digital infrastructure, as you know, is also making the moves, I think, gradually from that sort of a model, a registration-only model, to looking into what would, for example, stablecoins mean for India in the long run, right? So this is one element of it, which is the regulatory framework is maturing at scale. And then you also have the population, the dynamism, the mobile penetration, and the disposable incomes rising, which together, I think, is a perfect cauldron for moving beyond, experimentation towards large-scale adoption. So I think that's the reason why you're seeing, Binance has 20 plus jurisdictions globally where we have licenses.
2025 की अगर बात की जाए तो हमने देखा कि सिर्फ क्रिप्टो एंथुजियास्ट और रिटेल ही नहीं, इंस्टीट्यूशंस, कॉर्पोरेट्स ने भी यहाँ पर क्रिप्टो एज अ मार्केट में एंटर किया है। क्या लगता है आपको, आगे जाकर टोकनाइजेशन और ब्लॉकचेन इंफ्रा की बात की जाए तो फाइनेंस में ये कितना बड़ा रोल प्ले कर सकते हैं?
Yeah, so let me talk a bit about the institutional adoption first, and then I'll pivot to real-world asset tokenization, which I think is the core of your question. So institutional participation is increasing globally, right? And it's starting to drive crypto markets and how crypto is accessed, allocated, used, traded, and held. So we see this shift directly at Binance, and institutional trading volume on our platform has increased 21% year on year in 2025, and OTC trading surged 210%. Right. So what we've done in response, or actually in anticipation of this, is we've built a full institutional product suite, tri-party banking, Binance Wealth, managed fund accounts, crypto as a service, which is basically us building infrastructure for other financial institutions to offer wallet and liquidity infrastructure to their end users, and Binance Prestige, right? Each one is designed around how sophisticated capital actually gets allocated. Now, beyond our own infrastructure, the broader institutional entry is very well evidenced at this point. Digital asset treasury companies, there are 195 of them at this point that hold over 1 million Bitcoin each, right? And companies have also broadened beyond Bitcoin. Almost 70 entities now hold a total of 6.81 million ETH, which is about 20 billion USD on their balance sheets. Asset management giants like BlackRock, Fidelity, Morgan Stanley have expanded their own crypto offerings. BlackRock's EBIT amassed 70 billion in assets in just under 1 year. Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund holds about 500 million in Bitcoin. The Singapore Stock Exchange launched Bitcoin and Ethereum perpetual futures for institutional clients. So I can go on and on. What this is showing is that sovereign adoption, institutional adoption across the world is increasing on the institutional space. Now, what about tokenization and blockchain infrastructure in general, right? So tokenization, maybe early last year, the year before, when I was talking about it, it was a conceptual discussion. Right now, it's actually an execution-based discussion, and Binance is actively a part of it. Real-world assets basically accelerate the convergence of traditional finance and blockchain, essentially, right? And it enhances efficiency, it enhances 24/7 availability, and it actually enhances access to asset classes which the normal retail user before this previously was unable to access because of the high buy-in rates or high buy-in thresholds, right? And so the interest in RWA for institutions and for retail lies in the ability of this technology to improve market efficiency and democratize accessibility. And this is beyond just classification, right? So the infrastructure that we're building here will allow us to access products from bonds, real estate, cross-border settlement, remittances, and basically, in a nutshell, it's financial inclusion at scale. And we already support this. So at Binance, we already support tokenized money market funds, including BlackRock's BUIDL, which is basically a way of using eligible collateral that institutional clients have to be able to build on top of that and give them stable, yield-bearing assets available for 24/7 settlement, which, as you know, doesn't exist in a lot of emerging markets at this point. So this kind of operational utility, simplicity, and permanent availability simply doesn't exist in traditional finance. And I think that's where real-world asset tokenization is starting to plug in. And that's why institutions are building to adopt it. So just to finish off, BUIDL, Apollo's tokenized loan portfolio, Hamilton Lane's tokenized infrastructure fund, all of these were previously accessible only to institutions and only under strict conditions. Now what's happening is they're being made available to retail users through these institutions at entry points as low as USD $500.
CNBC बाजार प्रस्तुत करता है क्रिप्टो कॉर्नर पावर्ड बाय बाइनेंस।